Welcome back to the Metal Crafter. It's been a while since I don't post any videos. On one side, this project evolved from its original idea, and I also got sidetracked and lost motivation in the process. I was also busy painting miniatures, and other family matters got in the way. So this project took way longer to complete. The original idea was to make some FEV tanks for Fallout Wasteland Warfare, but then I thought they could be used in any other campaign. And I also decided to make further scenery pieces. So eventually, it turned into a full experiments lab. Let's hit the table. As with the previous sci-fi builds, I'll be using waste plastics from things I regularly use. The main parts of the experiments tanks will use the top of some deodorants, the heads of some sparkling water bottles, and some clear plastic drinks shots. While brainstorming on the idea, I thought of making the tanks modular and be able to place minis inside, in case any PCs, NPCs, or monsters would be going through some experiments. I started designing the height of the tanks and then marked some cutting lines. Used a hot knife to remove the plastic excess, both at the bottom and top of the shots. Also used a hot piercing tool to make a hole at the center of the top. Here I'm testing the layout of the main parts of the tanks. Smoothened the borders of the shots with the X-Acto knife and some sandpaper. Separated the parts of the bottle heads and then chopped out the lines of the thread inside. I wanted for the tanks to simulate being filled with liquid, and so thought and tried different ways to achieve that. Unfortunately, a few didn't work. One option was to use some cellophane paper and glue it to the clear plastic's interior, but couldn't get a proper glue that wouldn't mess with the transparency. Also, the shot's shape is not straight, but slightly coned, so it was difficult to measure and cut the cellophane properly. I also tried just painting the clear plastic, but then I lost transparency and I wanted for the mini's silhouette inside to be noticeable. So eventually, I went with a not so easy to implement option. I prepared some clear resin and added green paint. Then dropped the resin on the inside of the shots and spin them to cover all surface. Of course, this wasn't the most time-effective process, but as the resin started curing, I didn't have to spin the shots that much and eventually had a pretty cool result. The paint did not mix 100% with the resin and so left a pigment-like look, which I think gives the tanks a cool effect, as it seems like something's floating in the liquid mix. For the tank's base, I separated the deodorant tops and then cut a part of the plastic, leaving the inner circle, on which the glass-like part will sit upon. I cut a thin stripe of EVA foam and glued to reinforce the base where the two parts joined. Chopped off some small lugs that hold the other part of the base so I could remove it easily. From the start, this was a build where I wanted to expand my tools and techniques and use some LED lights. I wanted for the tanks to light up, and I first thought I could hide the lights and battery inside the bottle heads. Unfortunately, the space was too small and the battery's holder didn't fit. So then I thought to just make it part of the build. I first cut the nose of the bottle heads and tested about adding the holder there. I made some cuts in the plastic to stick the positive and negative metal legs, where the cables would connect. Made a test on how the LED would light the inside of the tank and where to position it. Glued the bulb with silicone and then weld the cables. Cut a small piece of aluminum foil and cover the top of the shot so the light would be directed down. Took the bottom and top plastic pieces outside and primed them. Then painted them with gunmetal. So did with the other plastic base. I cut a small piece of cardboard to cover the bottom of the base and then glued it. To cover the battery holder, I used a juice bottle's cap. Made some cuts to make it fit and also added some EVA foam on the inside so it would hold better. I thought this part could be a ventilation fan, so I first cut a hole on the cap. I have this small wheel from a toy and thought it would work just fine as a part of the fan. Glued both parts together and then painted gunmetal. I inserted the cables into the top of the tanks and then welded them. Glued to the middle part afterwards. Then painted some missing parts and covered all gunmetal with a clear varnish. Moving to the second part of scenery, I reused the other part of the bottle heads. I cut and replaced some of the pieces and then glued them together. Used a rubber band to hold them while hardening. With the X-Acto knife, I carved some lines in the plastic to simulate metal panels. Cut a small piece of round chipboard and glued to the top. Then added another small plastic piece. I grabbed a piece of plastic cable and removed the copper inside so it was more flexible. Then added it with super glue. Used a chrome spray to prime all pieces and started painting them. I wanted for all lab pieces to look operational and have bright colors. Have some synthetic paints that I usually don't use, so they would be suitable for these builds. To cover the holes in the plastic, I cut a piece of EVA foam and glued it. For the last piece of scenery, I wanted to make another regular tank, where the experimental liquid could be taken from, for example. I had this small candy peels plastic container with the shape of a soda can. Thought it would look great as a tank. I started by gluing both halves and then used a thick plastic security seal to hit the joint line. Made some carvings on the back so it would hold better to the glue. Added some extra plastic bits from the sparkling water bottle heads. And then added a leftover from a monitor's 3D print. Glued another thinner plastic security seal to the top with the same previous process. I took some measures and marked 3 additional places where to glue further plastic bits. Here taking a preliminary look on the scale. Got this antenna piece and glued it to the top of the tank. added a small cable piece to the terminal. Then went outside and primed the whole thing with some chrome paint. I started the painting with some metallic blue for both plastic security seals. As with the previous lab pieces, I went with mostly synthetic paints and used yellow for the base legs. Don't have a synthetic red, so used regular acrylic for part of the front. Then turquoise for the terminal and white for the cable. Completed the antenna part with a synthetic bronze. That's it. Let's take a look at this experiments lab. As mentioned, this build took too long to complete. Between losing crafting momentum, changing the scope, and deciding on the layout, it got really delayed. But though it's not the best of the builds I've made, I think it would do well on a sci-fi setting and fulfill its purpose. I can fit in some trap PCs on the experiment tanks or 3D print some creatures. As always, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel while checking on previous crafts. Share it with anyone and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook to see further pictures and announcements. I'll see you in the next craft.